There's a pivotal moment in Carl Jung's life that often goes unnoticed. Yet it holds the seed of everything he would later teach about the mind. After his professional and ideological split from Sigmund Freud, Jung fell into what he described as a deep psychological crisis, a confrontation with the unconscious. He withdrew from the world, haunted by vivid dreams, terrifying visions, and an overwhelming sense that he was losing grip on his rational self. But instead of suppressing these experiences or medicating them away, Jung leaned in. He allowed himself to descend into the depths of his mind, to face what he called the shadow, the hidden, denied, and often feared parts of the self. It was this inner exploration, not avoidance, that became the foundation of his lifelong work in depth psychology. Jung realized something profound during that time. The most dangerous enemy is not out in the world. It is the unexamined self within. And more importantly, the emotions that control us are often signals of that internal chaos we haven't yet understood. This is where we begin. What if I told you that the anger, frustration, anxiety, or shame you feel in moments of conflict aren't entirely about the situation at hand? What if those feelings are being triggered by something deeper, something buried? According to Jung, most of what we struggle with emotionally is not caused by external events, but by internal projections, unconscious material we haven't made peace with. And at the heart of that is the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves we've rejected, the qualities we've labeled as bad, unworthy, ugly, or weak. These parts get buried in the unconscious and don't disappear, they fester. They influence our behavior, distort our perception, and control our reactions. The more we deny them, the more power they hold. Think about it. When someone insults you and you react with instant rage or defense, what part of you is being threatened? Is it your rational mind? Or is it something deeper, some unresolved wound? Some insecurity? Some fear that you've tried to silence? If you can't control your response when you're triggered, maybe it's not truly you reacting, but your shadow. And here's the uncomfortable truth Jung uncovered. The shadow isn't evil. It's not your enemy. It is you, just not the parts of you you've accepted. But if you learn to face it, to integrate it, you reclaim incredible power. You become whole. And that, in Jung's words, is the journey toward individuation. The process of becoming your full, authentic self. So let me ask you a question. When was the last time you felt deeply angry, or irrationally anxious, or ashamed without fully understanding why? Most people try to get over those feelings or suppress them altogether. But suppression isn't mastery, it's avoidance. And what we avoid in ourselves becomes our master. In this video, I'm going to take you through 10 levels of psychological strength, not just to make you more resilient in the face of life's challenges, but to help you understand yourself with piercing clarity. Because the truth is, emotional strength doesn't come from fighting your feelings. It comes from facing them, understanding them, and choosing how to respond from a place of consciousness, not compulsion. This is not about becoming stoic, cold, or indifferent. Carl Jung didn't advocate the absence of feeling. He advocated depth. He believed emotions were meaningful, even sacred, but only if you understood their origin. Otherwise, you'd spend your entire life dancing to the tune of your unconscious, controlled by moods you can't name, chasing validation you can't explain, reacting to others as if your worth depends on their words. Jung taught that awareness is the first step to power. When you become aware of your shadow, when you start to notice the parts of yourself that you deny or disown, you begin to see how often your emotional pain is not caused by the outside world, but by your inner resistance You start to notice the voice in your head that says, "I must defend myself," or "I can't let them think I'm weak." And suddenly, you realize those thoughts aren't facts, they're echoes of an identity you haven't fully made peace with. This is where real transformation begins. Because the strongest version of you is not the one who never gets angry, never feels fear, never struggles. The strongest version of you is the one who knows exactly why those feelings arise and can choose how to respond with calm, intention, and integrity. Not suppression, not denial, but self-knowledge. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means stop chasing an ideal version of yourself. Start facing the one that already exists. Light and dark, joy and pain, strength and weakness. And that's what we're going to do. Across the next segments of this video, I'll guide you through 10 psychological principles rooted in Jung's teaching, each one designed to help you detach from the chaos of emotion. Stop being at the mercy of others and step into the role of conscious creator of your own reality. You don't need to fight your emotions. You don't need to fear your reactions. You need to understand them, because what you understand, you can master, and what you master, you can choose. So if you're ready not just to control your emotions, but to truly understand the self that lives beneath them, then keep watching. Let's begin. True inner peace doesn't come from pretending your emotions don't exist. It doesn't come from forcing yourself to be calm, or faking strength in moments of stress or insult. According to Carl Jung, the key is not suppression, but mastery, and mastery begins with separation. Specifically, separating your true self from the ego. The ego, in Jungian psychology, is the part of the psyche that identifies with I, the mask you wear, the roles you play, the image you project to the world. It's not evil, but it is fragile. And when someone insults you, it's usually not your true self that reacts, it's your ego feeling threatened. The ego hates to be wrong, exposed, humiliated. It thrives on validation and recognition. So when someone challenges you, makes a snide remark, questions your worth, mocks your appearance, it's the ego that surges with anger, not your essence. Let's walk through a simple situation. You're at work. A colleague makes a sarcastic comment in front of others. "Wow, I didn't expect you to actually finish something on time." You feel a rush of heat in your chest. Your heart rate spikes. Maybe you want to snap back. Maybe you go silent but rage inside. That visceral reaction, where is it coming from? Carl Jung believed that the people who irritate us often reveal parts of ourselves we haven't acknowledged. In his words, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That line isn't just poetic, it's diagnostic. It tells you that your emotional triggers are not weaknesses, they are clues. When someone insults you and you react with disproportionate intensity, Jung would ask, what part of you felt attacked? And why? Maybe you already doubt your competence. Maybe you secretly feel like an imposter in your role. The insult hits a nerve because it aligns with a part of yourself you haven't reconciled. That part, the hidden insecurity, is your shadow. You've pushed it away, labeled it as unacceptable. I tried to bury it, but when someone touches it, it surges to the surface, taking over your mind and emotions. This is why Jung didn't teach emotional detachment as indifference. He didn't believe in becoming numb. He believed in integration. That means learning to see your emotions as signals, not as facts. That means observing your ego's pain, but not becoming it. It means recognizing when your shadow is speaking, and gently, calmly choosing not to let it drive the conversation. Now imagine this. Someone insults you, and instead of reacting, you smile. Not because you're forcing yourself to look unbothered, Not because you want to appear enlightened or superior, but because you've recognized something deeper. You understand what's happening. You see the insult for what it is not, a reflection of truth, but a mirror of projections. You also recognize your own inner twinge as a whisper from your shadow, and instead of trying to crush it, you acknowledge it. Ah, this is that part of me I've been avoiding. This is my insecurity rising. Oh. You don't have to obey that emotion. You just have to understand it. That kind of response deeply calm, grounded, unfazed, not a performance. It is the natural result of someone who has stopped fighting with themselves, someone who no longer denies the parts of them that once ruled them unconsciously. This is emotional mastery in the Jungian sense, not detachment from life, but detachment from the compulsive need to protect your image, your ego, your projections. It is the ability to feel something and not act on it, to observe a rising emotion and say, I see you, but you do not control me. So the next time you feel that burning urge to defend yourself, pause, ask, what part of me is really reacting here? Is it my fear of looking weak? My fear of not being respected? My desire to be seen as competent? These are all ego needs. And ego needs are valid, but they are not sacred. They are not the core of who you are. Jung's work was about peeling away the illusion of the self. The illusion that your worth is based on what others think. The illusion that emotions are enemies. The illusion that calmness must come from suppressing your truth. The truth is, when you know yourself deeply and honestly, you no longer fear what others might say, because their words can only harm the image of you, not the reality of you. Their criticism can only disturb your ego, not your soul. That's the strength we're cultivating here. A strength rooted not in appearances, but in awareness, not in pretending to be unmoved, but in actually being unmoved because you've moved through your own inner chaos and come out the other side. So if someone mocks you, belittles you, tries to throw you off balance, you won't have to fake calm. You'll smile, not because it doesn't affect you, but because you know exactly why it tries to, and in that knowing, you take back control. This isn't emotional suppression. This is self-liberation. Failure is often seen as the end, a wall, a verdict, a label. Most people, when confronted with failure, respond in one of two predictable ways. They either turn inward with self-attack. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. Maybe I'm just not meant for this. Or they turn outward in blame. They were unfair. The system is rigged. No one gave me a chance. Both responses come from the same root, emotional discomfort. But Carl Jung believed failure offered something much deeper, much more transformative. To him, failure was not a punishment. It was an invitation. Jung taught that every crisis is a calling to consciousness. When life doesn't go as planned, when your efforts collapse, your relationships unravel, or your ambitions are met with rejection, you are faced with a choice. You can either fall into unconscious patterns of shame, resentment, and defense, or you can step into awareness and ask, what is this moment trying to teach me about myself? His famous words encapsulate this perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That means most of our suffering doesn't come from the failure itself. It comes from what we unconsciously associate with that failure. And because we're not aware of those associations, we assume it's the world that's cruel, or that destiny is against us. But what if failure isn't the enemy? What if failure is a mirror? Imagine standing before a mirror and seeing not just your reflection, but your fears, your suppressed hopes, your beliefs about worth and identity. That's what failure reveals. It doesn't define you. It reveals what you believe about yourself when your outer achievements no longer protect you, when your titles, your progress, your confidence crumble. What remains? For most people, the answer is insecurity, doubt, fear. That's why failure feels unbearable. It's not just the event, it's the emotions it unlocks. You don't fear failure. You fear what failure makes you feel. You fear the sense of powerlessness, the exposure of weakness, the silence that follows when your identity as a winner or capable person is stripped away. But according to Jung, this moment, this emotional unraveling is not your end. It is your beginning. To truly grow, Jung believed you must confront the shadow, those parts of yourself you've denied, hidden, or buried. Failure is one of the most powerful catalysts for this confrontation. When things fall apart, when nothing seems to work, when your carefully built ego structures collapse, that's when the shadow emerges. You may feel anger at yourself or others. You may feel shame. You may want to quit. But all of this is the psyche calling for integration. Jung's path was not the path of escape. It was the path of encounter. He invited us to turn toward what hurts, not away from it. To ask not, how do I escape this pain? But, what in me is being asked to grow? Let's take a concrete example. Imagine an entrepreneur whose business collapses, revenue dries up, investors pull out, the vision fails. On the surface, it's a financial loss. But internally, what arises? Perhaps a deep sense of personal failure. Perhaps the thought, I'm not cut out for this. Perhaps the painful association. This reminds me of when I let my family down. Suddenly, this is not about money. It's about unresolved wounds, inner narratives, and emotional weight that the failure has simply exposed. But this is precisely the moment where transformation can begin if it's met with awareness. Jung didn't offer formulas for success. He didn't teach how to avoid pain. He taught us how to sit with it long enough to learn from it. He believed that those who rise strongest from failure are not those who resist it, but those who integrate it into their understanding of self. They don't say, I failed, therefore I am weak. They say, I failed, therefore I have met a new edge of myself. Let me examine it. 1. That's not weakness. That's psychological strength. Because when you can face failure without losing your self-worth, you are free. When you can feel disappointment, grief, or shame, and still stand in your truth, you are powerful. And when you no longer fear those emotions, failure loses its grip on you. Jung's psychology wasn't about becoming fearless. It was about becoming aware. When you're aware of the unconscious drivers that cause you to attach your identity to success, you begin to reclaim your autonomy. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a witness to them. You see failure not as the world's judgment of your worth, but as life's feedback and opportunity to refine, adjust, and grow. So the next time failure shows up, don't run. Don't numb yourself with distraction. Don't collapse into self-pity. Pause. Ask, what story is this failure revealing? What emotions is it exposing that I've been avoiding? And most importantly, what part of me needs to be brought back into the light? Because the real tragedy is not failure. The real tragedy is refusing to learn from it, to run from the very experience that could liberate you. You don't become unbreakable by avoiding pain. You become unbreakable by walking through it with eyes open, with heart steady, with mind willing to see. That is how you meet the shadow. That is how you become whole. And that is why failure is never the end. It is the beginning of becoming someone who cannot be shaken by success or destroyed by loss, because your sense of self no longer depends on either. There is a crucial distinction that Carl Jung encouraged every individual to understand: the difference between reacting and reflecting, between unconscious emotional impulse and conscious inner observation, this distinction, though subtle, is often what separates those who are slaves to their emotions from those who master them. To react is immediate. It's raw. It often comes without thought. Someone insults you, and you snap. Someone questions you, and you get defensive. These reactions are not conscious decisions. They arise from old emotional imprints, ego wounds, past trauma, unconscious insecurities. Jung called this the dominance of the unconscious over the ego. When the unconscious is in control, we don't respond to what's happening, we respond to what it represents. To us, a parent's judgment, a childhood failure, a fear of inadequacy. On the other hand, to reflect is to interrupt the pattern. It is to insert space between the stimulus and your response. This is the moment when you step back, not to suppress your feelings, but to observe them. Jung referred to this ability as the inner witness, the part of you that can see the emotion without becoming it. It's not detached out of coldness. It's detached out of awareness. Imagine this. You're in a meeting. A colleague mocks your idea with a smirk and a sarcastic comment in front of the team. The old you would have jumped in, cutting words, a defensive tone, maybe even an emotional argument. But the version of you that has developed inner observation does something radically different. You pause, just for a second, and in that second, you ask yourself not, how do I get back at him? But, what part of me is speaking up right now? Is it the part of you that feels insecure? The part of you that was silenced as a child? The part of you that needs approval to feel competent? By asking this, you've shifted out of reaction and into reflection. You've stopped being the emotion and become the observer of it. This is not weakness. This is power. Jung believed that when we observe our reactions, we gain insight into the unconscious programs driving them. That awareness is the first step toward freedom. You no longer say, I got angry because he embarrassed me. You begin to say, I felt anger arise because something in me, something old, felt threatened. And now you have a choice. Do you act from that pain? Or do you respond from your center? One of the most effective tools to cultivate this level of presence is emotional journaling. After a triggering moment, write it down. Not just what happened, but how you felt. What thoughts came up? What fears were activated? You will start to see patterns. You will begin to recognize that many of your reactions are not about the present, they are echoes from the past. Another practice Jung would have valued is the pause. It sounds simple, but it is deeply profound. When triggered, stop for 10 seconds. Breathe. Count backward. Say nothing. These 10 seconds can mean the difference between damage and dignity, between escalation and clarity. Let me give you a story to make this real. A man, let's call him Danielis, presenting his project in front of senior executives. Midway, one of his colleagues, visibly threatened by Daniel's growing influence, makes a comment. Did you copy this from last year's failed pitch? The room goes quiet. All eyes turn to Daniel. There's a moment where everyone expects a reaction, but Daniel doesn't respond. He pauses. He looks at the speaker. He smiles slightly, then calmly continues his presentation without acknowledging the jab. The silence that follows is louder than any rebuttal. The colleague, expecting retaliation, is thrown off. The executives, expecting drama, are met with composure. Daniel doesn't lose control. He owns the moment. What happened here is not just social intelligence. It is psychological mastery. Daniel didn't suppress his emotion. He noticed it. He allowed the inner witness to observe it. And he made a conscious choice to give power to provocation. This is what Jung pointed toward when he spoke about becoming whole. Not splitting yourself between the calm you and the angry you, but integrating both so that even when anger arises, You are not controlled by it. Even when fear shows up, you are not hijacked by it, because in the end, your emotions are not the problem. Your reactions are not the enemy. The real issue is unconsciousness. When you respond without awareness, you are not choosing, you are reenacting. But when you step back, observe, and choose you, reclaim your power. That power is not loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply holds steady, unmoved, clear, whole. And that, as Jung would say, is the foundation of individuation, the path to becoming your most authentic, integrated self. Carl Jung once said, "A man who is unconscious of himself will always seek meaning outside." This single sentence captures a profound psychological truth. Those who have not faced themselves constantly look outward searching for validation, for confrontation, for noise to distract from their inner void. In contrast, those who know themselves have no need to constantly explain, react, or defend. They carry within them a stillness that is more powerful than any spoken word. And often, that stillness expresses itself through silence. Silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. Jung would argue that true silence, the kind rooted in awareness rather than suppression, is a sign of psychological integration. It is the refusal to be drawn into reactive chaos. It is the presence of the inner witness over the impulses of the ego. Think of a common scenario. Someone throws a verbal jab your way, perhaps trying to mock you in public or diminish you in a professional setting. The average person, still entangled in ego reactions, responds immediately, either defending themselves, retaliating, or awkwardly trying to explain. The silence feels unbearable to them. It must be filled. But a centered individual, one who has done the work, Jung described shadow integration, ego, detachment, inner reflection, does not rush to respond. They don't react at all. They observe. And this non-response creates something very interesting. Psychological dissonance in the aggressor. From a psychological standpoint, this is called expectancy violation. When a person insults someone, they are subconsciously seeking control over the emotional environment. They expect resistance, anger, shamesome feedback that confirms their power in the moment. But when the insult is met with silence, the loop is broken. The energy they projected finds no target. It rebounds, often causing them to feel confused, unsettled, or even insecure. They begin to wonder, did I not get to him? Did he not hear me? Does he know something I don't? This uncertainty shifts the power dynamic entirely. The silent one becomes the dominant presencino through force, but through absence. This is the paradox of silence. It appears passive, but it asserts authority. It appears empty, but it is full of restraint and clarity. And more importantly, it disrupts the unconscious games that most social interactions are based on. Jung understood this. He believed that much of human behavior is rooted in unconscious patterns. When someone is desperate to be heard, to prove, to explain, they are often being controlled by inner wounds and insecurities they haven't yet faced. But when someone is silent, not because they are repressing, but because they are aware, they become unpredictable. And unpredictability is powerful. People are drawn to those they cannot easily read. There is something compelling, almost magnetic, about someone who doesn't overshare, overreact, or over-explain. Their silence isn't empty, it signals self-containment. They're not trying to be liked. They're not trying to win an argument. They are simply present, and that presence creates a gravitational pull. You've likely encountered someone like this, a person who, by saying less, held more attention. A person whose calmness made others second-guess themselves. not because they were manipulating anyone, but because they were grounded in themselves. Their silence was not voidite, was precision. And so, here's something to consider. Have you ever been in the presence of someone whose quiet nature made you curious, even unsettled? Someone who didn't respond the way most people would, and that made them even more compelling? If so, that wasn't just charisma, that was intentional stillness. If this resonates with you, take a moment and comment below with the words, "I choose strategic silence." Let's see how many of us recognize the power of not always needing to be heard. This kind of silence, Jungian silence, not antisocial. It's not cold. It is simply a refusal to hand over your peace in exchange for momentary validation. It is choosing not to feed into games of ego, conflict, or emotional volatility. It is strength under control. It doesn't mean you never speak up. It means that when you do, your words carry more weight because they are deliberate. They are not automatic responses, but conscious contributions. In a noisy world, silence stands out. While others compete to be loud, to be right, to be seen, the one who remains still becomes the center, not because they fight for attention, but because their detachment reveals depth. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self, requires us to face everything within us that we've avoided. But once we do, we stop needing to broadcast who we are. We stop reacting to every provocation. We stop explaining our value to people who don't understand it. We simply are. And from that place, silence becomes more than a tool. It becomes an expression of power, a language of self-possession, a testament to the work you've done on yourself, visible in your calm, your restraint, your mystery, because those who do not know themselves must always explain, but those who do not need to be understood. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists." These words, while simple, reveal a profound truth about human suffering. The more we fight against what is, the more power we give to what we fear. Pain deepens not always because the world grows more hostile, but because we cling tighter to the illusion that we can and must control everything. Control is seductive. It gives the ego a sense of importance, of safety. We plan meticulously, build expectations, attach our identity to outcomes, relationships, careers, status, approval. And when those things collapse, as they inevitably do at some point, we don't just grieve the loss, we experience something more destabilizing, an identity crisis. Take, for instance, the story of a successful investor, someone who built his entire self-image around market success. For years, his decisions brought wealth and recognition, but one year, the market turned. He miscalculated. His assets evaporated. His reputation took a hit. Most would spiral into despair, anger, denial. Why? Because the identity they built on external achievement had crumbled. To lose money is one thing. To lose who you think you are, that's existential. But this investor had studied Jung. He'd done the inner work. And in the stillness of that collapse, he said something powerful. "I am not the balance in my account. I am not the rise and fall of the market. I am not this loss. I am the awareness that watches all of this happen." And that's what letting go means, not giving up, but releasing your identification with outcomes. It's the conscious decision to stop resisting reality and begin flowing with it. Jung believed that suffering often comes not from the event itself, but from our refusal to let it be what it is. When we say, "This shouldn't be happening," or "I must fix this now," we trap ourselves in a loop of anxiety and inattention. We move against the current, but the mind, like water, is meant to flow. When you fight the current, you drown. When you float, you are carried not helplessly, but willingly toward transformation. Letting go, in Jungian psychology, doesn't mean passivity. It means surrendering to the deeper wisdom of life's unfolding. It means trusting that not every loss is destruction. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes it is the shadow stepping forward to be acknowledged, inviting you to shed another illusion of control. Try this. Sit in stillness. Take out a notebook and write down 5 things you are clinging to right now, things you cannot truly control. It might be a person's approval, a job opportunity, a specific timeline for success, the outcome of a relationship, the fear of failure. Write them clearly, one by one. Then, next to each one, ask yourself, am I this thing? Does my value truly depend on this happening or not happening? You'll notice the anxiety doesn't come from the thing itself, but from how tightly you are fused to it. Now, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. With each exhale, imagine yourself loosening your grip, not abandoning your desires, but detaching your worth from them. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to chase. You don't need to be in control of everything to be at peace. This is not a spiritual escape. It's psychological maturity. Letting go is not something mystical. It is something deeply practical. It is the act of choosing presence over resistance, of choosing movement over fixation. The river does not stop because of a rock. It flows around it, reshaping the land quietly, persistently. You, too, can meet life this way. You can learn to say, this is painful, but I do not have to fight it. I can feel it, learn from it, let it pass through me. And because the truth is, you are not the circumstances of your life. You are the awareness behind them. And when you remember that, when you stop resisting what you cannot control, you become free, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer imprisoned by your need to dominate it. Let go, flow forward, and you'll discover, as Jung did, that the parts of life we stop trying to control are often the very ones that return to us transformed. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That simple sentence contains both an invitation and a challenge. In a world obsessed with validation, comparison, and approval, the idea of truly becoming yourself apart from what others think of you can feel radical. But Jung understood that the path to psychological wholeness does not pass through the crowd. It moves inward, toward the self. Approval is seductive. We learn from an early age that being liked, praised, or accepted brings safety. It becomes a form of currency. As we grow, we begin to shape our identity not from within, but from the reactions of others. We become experts in adaptation, reading the room, adjusting our tone, performing competence or humility, depending on what wins approval. On the surface, this looks like social intelligence. But beneath, it often stems from a fragile ego that hasn't yet anchored itself in authentic self-knowledge. A weak ego needs constant reinforcement. It fears rejection because it confuses disapproval with erasure. To be disliked, for someone in this state, feels like being invalidated at the core. But Jung taught that the true self does not depend on being liked. It simply is. It exists before approval, beyond praise, and outside the grasp of judgment. The work is to remember that self, not invent it, not fabricate it to please others, but uncover it through deep inner inquiry. This is the process Jung called individuation. It's the journey of peeling away the false identities, the masks, the roles, the personas that we've created to be accepted, not because acceptance is wrong, but because when it replaces authenticity, we lose our center, and eventually, we become strangers to ourselves. Have you ever caught yourself saying or doing something just to fit in, and later felt hollow? Or have you ever hesitated to speak your truth because you feared losing favor with someone? That inner conflict is not random. It's the soul pushing back against the false self. And the more we ignore that push, the more anxious, lost, or resentful we become. To live by the expectations of others is to trade freedom for comfort. It is to walk someone else's path, wear someone else's shoes, carry someone else's fears. Jung would say that this is not just a mistake, it is a psychological crisis, because the longer we defer to outside voices, the harder it becomes to hear our own. But here's the truth. You don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. You never did. The validation you're looking for from the outside is a substitute for something much deeper: self-acceptance, and that can only come from within. The irony is that the more you seek approval, the less authentic you become. And the less authentic you are, the harder it is to receive genuine respect. People may like the version of you that performs, that conforms, that pleases, but they can't connect with your essence because you're not showing it. On the other hand, when you stand firm in who you are, flaws and all, questions and all, something powerful happens. People might still judge you. Some might walk away. But the ones who stay will see the real you, and you will no longer be at the mercy of public opinion. So ask yourself, honestly, are you walking your own path, or are you still walking the path of approval? Are your choices rooted in your truth, or in someone else's expectations? If you feel called to reclaim your direction, I invite you to comment below. I choose myself. Let it be a declaration not of isolation, but of alignment. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's the first step toward becoming whole. You are not here to be universally accepted. You are here to be authentically expressed. And once you accept yourself fully, without waiting for others to validate that choice, you become free, unshaken, untouchable. Not because the world finally approves of you, but because you no longer require it. Carl Jung never argued to be right. He never tried to overpower others with opinion or volume. His power was quiet, observational, reflective, penetrating. He spoke only what was necessary. And when he did, his words carried weight because they came from deep internal clarity. This is the kind of authority that doesn't demand attention, it commands it. Silently, in a world obsessed with expression, the person who doesn't feel the need to constantly explain themselves stands out, not because they are trying to be mysterious, but because their silence reflects something few possess: internal discipline. There is a reason quiet people often feel intimidating. It's not because they're hiding something sinister, but because we can't easily read them. When someone doesn't reveal their every thought, every insecurity, every emotional reaction, our minds begin to fill in the gaps. We speculate, we second guess, and that discomfort, that uncertainty, it's not about them, it's about us. Psychologically, we fear what we can't predict, and people who speak less, who don't give away their emotional landscape, who don't overreact are hard to map. There's power in that. Power not rooted in manipulation, but in mastery. Jung understood that inner stillness is not natural for most people. It must be cultivated, and the cultivation of stillness begins with restraint, the conscious act of observing before speaking, of understanding before responding, of feeling fully without acting impulsively. Silence, in this context, is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of control. Imagine a situation where a heated conversation begins to spiral. One person raises their voice, another defends, another accuses, but then there's someone calm, grounded, silent, Not withdrawn, not indifferent, but simply unmoved. They listen, they assess, they speak only when the moment requires it, and even then, only what is needed. That person is the anchor in the room. Their silence isn't passive. It's a form of energy, and everyone feels it. This kind of stillness comes from within. It is not an act. It is not repression. It is the result of someone who has spent time confronting their inner chaos, learning to hold emotion without being dominated by it. They are not reactive because they have already faced the triggers that control most people. Jung would say that this person has integrated enough of their unconscious to stop being ruled by it. They no longer need to dominate a conversation to feel heard. They no longer need to defend their identity, because their identity isn't fragile. It isn't built on the shifting sands of others' opinions. It is rooted deep within, the ability to remain silento, withhold response, to sit in discomfort without flinches, one of the most underrated forms of self-mastery. It reveals how well you know yourself, because when you are uncertain, when you are insecure, you fill space, you explain, you react, but when you are centered, silence becomes your ally. And ironically, those who are most silent often end up being the ones everyone listens to, because when they do speak, it's not noise, it's signal. So ask yourself, do you speak to be understood? Or do you speak because you are afraid of not being seen? Do you share out of clarity or out of compulsion? Do you respond because it's truly necessary or because you haven't yet learned to sit with tension? Real strength is not about being louder than everyone else. It's about being so anchored in who you are that you no longer need to prove it. Your silence becomes the evidence. That's what Jung embodied. He didn't strive to be followed. He simply lived and thought and wrote from a place of relentless inner observation. He asked questions most were afraid to ask, and when he answered, he did so not to persuade, but to illuminate. There is no greater form of power than this. Silence, then, is not the opposite of communication. It is the foundation of wisdom. It is energy concentrated, intentional, unwavering, and the one who holds it not out of fear, but out of understanding has already won. You don't need to conquer the world. You only need to make sure the world doesn't make you lose yourself. That is the essence of Carl Jung's philosophy, not escape. Not domination, but grounded presence. He never suggested that the world would become easier, kinder, or more predictable. What he offered instead was something far more enduring, the ability to remain centered, whole, and awake within it. Jung taught that the true journey of life is not to avoid pain, conflict, or criticism, but to engage with the world, while staying rooted in your authentic self. He believed that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly can, only happen when you stop identifying with masks, roles, and external noise. It happens when you live among chaos, but are no longer defined by it. When you walk through failure, but are not diminished by it. When you hear criticism, but don't confuse it with truth. Because in the end, no one, not your enemies, not your family, not your pastor's power over your inner world, unless you hand it to them. The insult only hurts if it strikes a wound you haven't healed. The failure only breaks you if you've mistaken success for identity. The silence of others only disturbs you if you've learned to measure your worth by their attention. You don't need to respond to every attack. You don't need to prove your value. You don't need to shout to be heard. You simply need to remember who you are. That's what Jung's work has always pointed toward. The center of the self. That deep, quiet core within you that exists beyond fear, beyond emotion, beyond expectation. And once you begin to live from that place, the world can no longer shape you. It can only reflect you. So as we close this journey, I ask you not to walk away, inspired, but committed. Committed to one thing, not letting the world drag you into forgetting yourself. Because if you can master that, if you can stay whole in the face of pressure, judgment, failure, and change, then you are already free. You are already powerful. And if something in this video stirred something inside you, it's not by chance. That's your unconscious responding. That's your inner voice remembering itself. If you're ready to go deeper on this path into self-understanding, into mastery of the mind, into the strength that comes not from control, but from clarity, leave a comment below with the words, "I choose to understand myself." And if you found this journey meaningful, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Together, we'll continue to explore the deepest parts of the human psychonaut to escape the world, but to meet it with unshakable presence.